They told you that discipline is everything. Wake up at 5 a.m., cold showers, workout before sunrise, grind in silence, repeat, repeat, repeat. They sold you the idea that if you just push hard enough, for long enough, eventually, the world will open up. That success is nothing but a math equation of pain multiplied by consistency, that your suffering is a badge, that your routine is sacred, and your predictability a virtue. But what if that's the biggest lie you've ever believed? What if the very thing you thought would make you powerful is the reason you remain powerless? Machiavelli, the prince of ruthless realism, would have laughed, because discipline, in its purest form, is not power. It's obedience. It's the art of molding yourself to a system. It's predictability disguised as virtue. And in a world ruled by predators, the predictable man is prey. Let's be brutally clear. The disciplined man is not the most feared. He is the most easily mapped. He is the one whose moves you can predict, whose actions follow a loop, whose decisions are dictated not by opportunity, but by ritual. He is the one who proudly builds a cage and calls it strength. You've been told that waking up early is power, that sticking to routines, no matter what, makes you elite, that never breaking a streak is evidence of superiority. But look closer. Who gave you that script? Books written for the masses, videos made to control, not to free. Systems engineered not to empower you, but to make you reliable, trackable, controllable. And here's the Machiavellian twist. If someone can anticipate your next move, they already own you. Discipline has become religion. And like all religion, it promises salvation. Someday, somehow, if only you keep the faith. If only you grind harder, suffer more, delay longer. But Machiavelli, he didn't suffer for virtue. He didn't grind for years, hoping the gods of success would smile down. He studied the world as it is, not as we wish it were. And what he found was simple. Power belongs not to the consistent, but to the strategic. Let me say it plain. Discipline is useful, only when it's a weapon, only when it serves you, not when you serve it. When your routine becomes your master, when your habits become your identity, when breaking the pattern feels like a betrayal of self, then you are no longer a man. You are a program, and programs can be hacked, predicted, defeated. Ask yourself this. Why do you do what you do every day? Because it creates real advantage, or because it helps you feel like you're improving? There's a world of difference between results and rituals, between leverage and loyalty to a dead process. A man wakes up at 5 a.m. He journals, he meditates, he works out, he eats his clean meal, checks off his tasks, and hits the pillow proud. But Machiavelli would ask just one question. Did any of that bring you closer to power? Not pride, not self-satisfaction, not likes or admiration from peers. Power. Did it increase your leverage? Did it put you in control of something that mattered? Did it shift the balance in your favor? If the answer is no, then you're not disciplined. You're performing discipline. And that performance has a cost. Here's the cost no one talks about. The cost of opportunity lost. The deals you missed because you were too rigid. The pivot you ignored because it didn't fit your routine. The instinct you silenced because it wasn't on schedule. And the most dangerous part? You feel proud of it. You say things like, I never skip. I push through no matter what. I always stick to the plan. But do you? Or does the plan stick to you? Machiavelli didn't trust men who clung to their own systems, because once a man becomes too loyal to his own pattern, he becomes readable, and once he's readable, he's beatable. You think you're strong because you keep going. But the true strength is knowing when to stop, when to pause, when to vanish, when to pivot so sharply that no one can track you. That's what strategy looks like. That's what control looks like. So here's your first test. Can you burn your habits to the ground if the terrain changes? Can you walk away from a streak you've held for years if the mission demands it? Can you be more loyal to power than to pride? Because discipline makes you respectable, but strategy makes you feared. And in the real game of power, respect is a smile. Fear is a throne. So if you want to be the man they can't track, can't predict, can't own, then discipline must serve you, not define you. Because Machiavelli didn't build kingdoms on habit. He built them on flexibility, on deception, on timing, and above all, on the willingness to break his own rules before anyone else could. Control. It's the promise discipline whispers in your ear. If you follow the routine, if you stick to the plan, if you grind without fail, then, and only then, you'll control your life. But what if the opposite is true? What if your relentless commitment to routine is actually blinding you? What if the illusion of control is the very thing that's keeping you from ever actually having it? Machiavelli didn't chase control through routine. He chased it through clarity. Clarity of outcome, clarity of terrain, clarity of human nature. He understood something most modern men never will. The disciplined man believes he's in control, but he's often just trapped in a loop that no longer serves him, but one he's too proud to question. He tells himself, I'm consistent, I'm focused, I'm on track. But ask him this, track to what? What exact outcome are you optimizing for? He'll stutter, he'll generalize, he'll say things like growth or improvement. But those are illusions too. Because in the real game of power, vague goals are the first sign you've lost the map. Let me show you how this trap works. You start with a small win, a routine, a habit, a goal. It works, it helps, you improve. But then something happens. The terrain shifts, the opportunity moves, the game changes, but you don't. You cling to what used to work. You worship the process. You tell yourself it's just a matter of time. But it's not. It's a matter of adaptation. You don't need more control. You need more awareness. Control is not about holding the reins tighter. It's about knowing which horse is even worth riding. But discipline teaches you to hold on tighter, even as the path crumbles beneath you. Machiavelli would call this the delusion of momentum. You're running at full speed, but you're running in the wrong direction. Think of the man who spends 2 hours every morning perfecting his morning routine. Workout, meditation, breathing, reading, green smoothie, cold shower, gratitude journal. And he feels amazing. But when you zoom out, you realize his business is crumbling. His relationships are shallow. He hasn't made a bold move in months, but he keeps doing the routine. Because it's the only place he still feels in control. Machiavelli would call that a tragedy. A man who mistook performance for progress. A man who let the illusion of control rob him of real leverage. You see, real control isn't rigid. It's not based on what time you wake up or how many tasks you checked off. It's based on one brutal question. Am I moving closer to power or just staying busy? Discipline gives you the illusion of movement. You feel accomplished. You feel like you're doing the right things. But here's the test. If I stripped away your calendar, your to-do lists, your rituals and habits and streaks, would you still know what to do next? Or would you panic? Would you still know how to create momentum in chaos? Would you still be dangerous without your routine? Because that is the essence of real control, adaptability. And discipline, when followed blindly, kills adaptability. Why? Because discipline teaches you to override your instincts, to ignore your gut, to silence the part of your brain that says, this no longer works. And so you keep going, not because it's effective, but because you're afraid to lose your structure. Machiavelli saw this in politics. He saw kings fall not because they lacked discipline, but because they were too committed to outdated structures. They clung to old alliances, old rules, old codes of honor, while their enemies adapted and won. This is the curse of the disciplined mind. It values effort over outcome, consistency over leverage, control over clarity. And in the modern world, that mindset is praised. But behind that praise is a hidden design. Systems don't want you to be flexible. They want you to be consistent. Because consistent people are predictable. And predictable people are easy to manipulate. Think about it. The man who always does the same thing at the same time every day is the man who will never surprise you. He will never outmaneuver you. He will never disrupt the board. He is safe. He is visible. He is already defeated. And that's why the world teaches you to be disciplined, not for your power, but for its convenience. But there's another path, the Machiavellian path. The path where you don't follow structure, you use it. You don't get addicted to routines. You break them when they lose value. You don't cling to plans. You redesign them at will. Because that is real control, the ability to step outside the rhythm and choose the beat that serves you best. So ask yourself, is your discipline serving your mission? Or is it just protecting your ego? Have you built a system that gives you leverage? Or have you built a prison that gives you comfort? Because when things collapse, and they always do, the disciplined man panics. The strategic man adapts. The disciplined man says, this isn't how I planned it. The Machiavellian says, good, now we play my game. And that is control. They warned you about indiscipline. They told you it was weakness, failure, decay. But what they never told you is that strategic indiscipline might be the most powerful weapon a man can possess. Because in a world addicted to routines, the one who can break his pattern intentionally, decisively, becomes unpredictable, untrackable, uncatchable. And that man, he is feared. Let's get something clear. This isn't about laziness. This isn't about neglect. This isn't about chaos for chaos's sake. This is about learning when to break your own rules to gain maximum leverage. This is about understanding that in the real world, the man who adapts the fastest wins, because consistency creates comfort, but unpredictability creates power. You wake up at 6 a.m. every day. You go to the gym. You journal. You meditate. You follow your system like scripture. And then your enemy learns your pattern. He knows when you're offline. He knows when you're too focused on ritual to react. He knows where to strike. You've made yourself a machine. And machines don't win wars. Strategists do. Machiavelli didn't admire the man who could follow orders. He admired the one who could bend reality. He knew that the ruler isn't the one who moves first. It's the one who moves last. At exactly the right moment. When the terrain is soft, when the enemy is blind, when the strike is clean. And guess what? That moment doesn't always arrive at 6 a.m. It doesn't always follow the calendar. It arrives when it arrives. And only the man who isn't chained to discipline can respond fast enough to seize it. Strategic indiscipline means this. You choose when to follow the plan, and you choose when to break it. You're not a slave to your habits. You're the architect of them. You follow structure only when it builds advantage. And the moment it stops, you walk away. No guilt, no hesitation. Because power doesn't care how consistent you've been. Power only responds to the move that shifts the balance. Picture two men, both intelligent, both ambitious. The first man follows the plan. Wakes up, works, studies, repeats, every single day. But the second, he's fluid. One day he disappears. The next he strikes. 1 month he's in monk mode. The next, he's building alliances in silence. He has no visible rhythm. He has no permanent schedule. But he always moves when it counts. Who do you think wins? Let me show you what strategic indiscipline looks like in practice. He cancels his routine to seize an unexpected opportunity, not because he's disorganized, but because he's responsive. He pauses progress on one front to attack another weakness, because he doesn't need to finish everything. He needs to win what matters. He allows silence to build tension in negotiations, because he knows that saying less at the right time can create more power than any script. He disappears from the battlefield, only to reappear where no one expected. Because nothing is more terrifying than a ghost with a strategy. The disciplined man, he keeps walking forward, even when he's walking into a trap, because his plan said, keep going. The strategic man, he changes direction instantly, because he answers to no system but the mission. That's the difference. The disciplined man serves the routine. The strategic man uses the routine, and then burns it the moment it stops giving him leverage. He is loyal to outcomes, not process. He is loyal to power, not appearances. Ask yourself, have you ever felt like your life is moving, but not progressing? Like you're checking all the boxes, but something's missing? That's the signal. That's the voice you've been trained to ignore. It's the part of you that wants to recalculate, to break pattern, to adapt. But discipline silences it. Discipline says, push through. Discipline says, don't quit. Even when quitting is exactly what you need to do, to survive, to win. Strategic indiscipline is not randomness. It is calculated disruption. It is disappearing so no one can track your rhythm. It is breaking patterns so no one can mirror your moves. It is pausing your progress to amplify your positioning. And most of all, it is abandoning anything, no matter how sacred, if it no longer serves the goal. Machiavelli didn't teach you to be consistent. He taught you to be effective. He didn't preach effort. He preached results. He didn't admire routine. He admired leverage. So here's the question that separates the servant from the strategist. Can you walk away from your own system without fear when it's time to strike somewhere else? Because until you can, you're not dangerous. You're disciplined. And the disciplined man is visible, predictable, expendable. But the strategically undisciplined, he's something else entirely. He's not on the radar. He's not on the clock. He's not in the system. He's in control. Discipline builds a wall. Strategic indiscipline opens the gate. And the man who can do both, he's not just efficient. He's not just respected. He's feared. The world is full of disciplined men. They wake up early. They grind relentlessly. They follow routines like sacred laws. They believe consistency is their greatest weapon. But here's the cold Machiavellian truth. Predictability is your enemy. And if you want to rise above the crowd, you must learn to exploit the disciplined. Because predictability is a weakness that can be hunted. And the disciplined man, he hands you his weaknesses on a silver platter. Let's break down how you can turn this predictability into power. Imagine a battlefield. 2 warriors stand opposed. One is disciplined. He moves the same way every day. His habits are transparent. His next move is no mystery. The other is strategic. He watches. He waits. He studies the predictable warrior's pattern like a hunter tracks prey. He notes every routine, every ritual, every weakness masked behind consistency. And then he strikes where the disciplined warrior least expects. In business, this looks like watching your competitor's launch schedule. When they always release new products every January and July, you disrupt the market in February, catching them off guard. In politics, it means noticing that your opponent always takes the same stance on every debate question. So you prepare a surprise shift that destabilizes their narrative. In life, it means understanding the habits of those around you and creating confusion where they expect predictability. The disciplined man is a map. His moves can be plotted, his reactions anticipated, his weaknesses exposed. Because when you know someone's rhythm, you know exactly how to control them. That's power. Now, here's what Machiavelli teaches about exploiting this weakness. First, never let your own habits become your identity. When someone can define you by your routine, they have a key to your behavior. Second, study the routines of others like a scientist studies patterns. Ask, what will he do next? When will he rest? When will he be vulnerable? Third, attack in those vulnerable windows. Not with brute force, but with psychological precision. Create doubt, create confusion. Consider the story of Cesare Borgia, Machiavelli's infamous pupil. Borgia knew the dangers of predictability. When he marched his armies, he deliberately altered his routes. He avoided the expected roads. He feigned retreats and sudden advances. He broke his own habits constantly. Why? Because he knew a predictable general is a dead general. His enemies, expecting his usual tactics, walked into traps. They were caught off guard, defeated. That's the power of exploiting predictability. And it's not just physical moves, it's emotional predictability too. The disciplined man often reveals his emotional patterns. When he gets angry, when he freezes, when he pushes forward or pulls back. By learning to read these signals, you gain control over not just his actions, but his mind. You become the puppeteer, pulling strings from the shadows. Now let's get tactical. If you want to exploit the disciplined, here's your blueprint. Observe obsessively. Watch their schedules, habits, language, and behavior. Map their predictability. Where do they act with certainty? Where do they show rigidity? Create controlled disruptions. Drop misinformation. Change your own rhythms to unsettle them. Force them into defensive positions. Strike decisively. When their routine falters, hit where it hurts most. Beware, though. The disciplined man can become dangerous if he learns this lesson, because predictability can be weaponized too. But most never do. Most remain loyal servants to their routines, blind to the fact they've painted a target on their back. So remember, discipline alone is weakness. When it becomes a script others can read. But when you learn to exploit that script, when you become the hunter who knows the prey's every move, you become a master. You don't have to be stronger or faster. You only need to be smarter. And that is the essence of Machiavellian power, turning the predictability of others into your ultimate advantage. Discipline teaches you to follow rules, to stay inside lines, to obey systems. But Machiavelli, he taught us the real power comes when you learn to break those rules strategically, because rules are made to be broken, especially when they no longer serve your mission. Think about it. Every empire that dominated history did so because its leaders knew when to bend, break, or rewrite the rules, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity, out of calculated intelligence. Strategic flexibility is the art of adapting your actions in real time. It's the willingness to discard plans that no longer work, to shift alliances, to invent new tactics. It's not chaos. It's control through calculated disruption. Discipline locks you into a framework. Flexibility frees you from it. When you are flexible, you become a river, flowing around obstacles, carving new paths. You don't waste energy fighting the mountain. You find the way around it. And this is what true power demands. Imagine a chess player who follows the same opening moves every game. He is predictable. His opponent learns to counter him. Now imagine a player who varies his openings, who sacrifices pieces not out of desperation but design, who shifts from offense to defense on a whim, who breaks all rules to create chaos. Who wins? Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that the man who clings to rules becomes a slave to them. That's not leadership. That's obedience. True dominance comes from knowing when to discard the rules entirely, when to burn your playbook, when to surprise your enemies with moves they cannot predict, when to pivot your entire strategy in mid-battle. Because rigidity leads to ruin. Ask yourself, how many times have you kept pushing through a plan because that's what disciplined people do? Even when every sign told you it was failing, even when your gut screamed, change course? That's not strength, that's blindness. The strategically flexible man says, I don't fear breaking the rules. I fear following rules that make me weak. He honors outcomes, not tradition. He respects power, not process. He knows that every rule is a tool to be wielded, repurposed, or discarded. Look at the great rulers in history. Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, breaking Roman law, and made himself dictator. Napoleon ignored centuries of warfare doctrine and conquered Europe. They didn't just follow discipline, they rewrote the game. And that's the mindset you must adopt. You must become the master of your own rules. Train yourself to recognize when a rule is serving you and when it's enslaving you. Break the rules when the moment demands it. Change your habits, break your rhythms. Because power isn't won by the man who never deviates. It's won by the man who can shift faster, strike harder, and disappear deeper than anyone else. The disciplined man builds a fortress. The strategically flexible man builds an empire. And empires don't survive by standing still. They survive by moving, by evolving, by breaking every rule except one. The rule to win. You've learned why discipline can be a cage. You've seen how predictability exposes weakness. You've discovered the power of strategic flexibility. Now it's time for the final truth. Unpredictability is your ultimate weapon. Because when no one can read your moves, you become unstoppable. Machiavelli knew that rulers don't just adapt, they master the art of being unreadable, not by acting erratically or without purpose, but by weaponizing their own rhythm. They break their own patterns on purpose. They create confusion. They leave enemies guessing. They blur the lines between strategy and chaos. Imagine this. 1 week you're aggressive, pushing hard, visible. The next, you retreat, silent, almost invisible. One day you answer every message immediately, appearing accessible. The next, you vanish, cold and untraceable. One season you build alliances openly. The next, you work in shadows, dismantling opposition quietly. That is the dance of power. When you control your rhythm, you control how others perceive you. You control their expectations. And when expectations are shattered, you control their minds. Because humans are wired to seek patterns. When you deny them those patterns, you force them into confusion. And confusion breeds fear. Fear is a far more potent currency than respect or admiration. When you are unpredictable, You command attention without explanation. You make your enemies question every move. You become the ghost in the system. But unpredictability isn't chaos. It's precision wrapped in mystery. It's control behind the curtain. It's discipline within disruption. And it's mastered by those willing to break their own habits before anyone else does it for them. So, how do you weaponize your rhythm? Break your routine intentionally. Sleep in. Skip the gym. Change your work hours. Vary your emotional responses. Be warm one moment, cold the next. Keep people guessing how you feel. Shift your social patterns. Disappear from some circles and appear in others unexpectedly. Control your availability. Respond instantly sometimes. Delay other times. Never predictable. Change your priorities openly. Start projects, abandon them, start new ones. Always with a strategic reason. Every move should leave observers unsure. Is this a new plan? A test? A trap? Because when no one can decode you, you hold the keys to the kingdom. Remember this. The disciplined man is a book everyone has read. The predictable man is a map everyone has studied. But the man who controls his rhythm? He is a riddle wrapped in an enigma. He doesn't just win battles, he wins wars. So ask yourself, are you predictable? Or are you a force no one can anticipate? Because power belongs to the unpredictable. And the man who masters his rhythm controls not just his life, but the entire game.